right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined all the way from Victoria in British Columbia by Darryl Stickle. How you doing, Darryl?
I'm doing well. I'm better now that I'm hanging out with you, John.
Yeah, flattery get you everywhere, Darryl. And Darryl is a true thought leader in the area of trust. He sets a great example and offers valuable insights and guidance on leadership and transformation. PhD in business from Duke, tenured consultant for McKinsey and Company. Darryl's experience in education has equipped him with academic and practical expertise. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is trust and building trust. And you can see behind Darryl, you have trust unlimited. So talk to me a little bit about, Darryl, why did you focus so much? Why do you focus so much on the trust piece? Why is trust so foundational to you?
So part of that's my history and my background where I grew up. I grew up in a small town in northern Canada, and it was pretty isolated, and so people had to rely on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up feeling like if I could help people, I should.
Right.
And so we fast forward through some trauma and challenges and things that provoked a sense of empathy in me. And I found myself at university. I'd be sitting on a bus and some stranger would sit next to me and say, I'm really having a hard time right now.
Yeah.
And I wanted to understand why that was happening. It wasn't happening to other people around me. And so I worked with troubled teens and families in crisis and on crisis lines and those kinds of things to get a better sense of it. And then eventually I was working for the federal government in Canada. We were negotiating land claims in British Columbia. And they asked me, how do we convince a group of people we shafted for over 100 years they should trust us?
Yeah.
And it seems like a good question.
It's a very good question.
So that's what I went and wrote my doctoral thesis on, was building trust in hostile environments. And
what was
Yeah.
I mean, because that's a really interesting one, right? So building trust with a group of people who have been mistreated, right? And who have every reason not to trust and not even to want to engage. What did you learn from that? And what were some of the outcomes or the learnings from that allowed you to say, okay, I can take this on and I can build a trust model, if you like?
Yeah, I think partly my history and my life experience had prepared me well for some insights around that topic. And then I started looking at the research, and there was just this series of aha moments, one of which was that overwhelmingly the research focused on uncertainty, and it treated people like rational actors. And you've met people, right, John?
A few.
Yeah, we're not always rational.
Yes, I've met a lot who aren't.
Yes.
And people are probably watching this going, yes, Mr. Golden, you've had your irrational moments yourself.
Yeah. And so we've been trying to build trust in environments where emotions are profoundly poignant and powerful. And it doesn't work. And so there were a few things that I started looking at that the other research hadn't. Things like including levels of vulnerability, right? Which meant that we could talk about trust as it's not a black and white situation. You don't either trust or distrust people. You trust some people more than others.
Right.
So it's more like a dimmer switch than a light switch. And when we came to looking at emotions, whether we like or dislike people, they have a powerful effect on how we evaluate the data, how we look at the outcomes of our interactions with folks. And it was pretty much ignored in the literature. And so, we need to figure out how to reset some of those emotional states first before the cognitive rational elements of the model actually take hold.
So why is it that some people you feel like instinctively trust and other people instinctively don't? But the way there are some people that you instinctively trust, and a lot of people the opposite. Why do some people instinctively trust and other people instinctively don't?
So for me, there's a formula.
Mm-hmm.
Trust is a combination of uncertainty and vulnerability. It's uncertainty times vulnerability equals risk. and we each have a threshold of risk that we're comfortable with. Some people just have a higher threshold than others
Right.
when it comes to that. And it comes from social learning. Maybe their culture or their environment or their background or just part of their personality has allowed them to have more positive experiences when they've made themselves vulnerable than negative ones.
Yeah. And you explain to me a little bit about the vulnerability part, because this is a word that's been thrown around a lot over the last few
Yeah,
years, and I feel like it has. I always find when people start throwing around those words, like they devalue them, they start to get all different meanings to different
sure.
people. And so, talk to me a little bit about about how you define vulnerability.
So trust is the willingness to make yourself vulnerable,
Mm,
right? And that can
right.
be sharing information, that can be relying on someone else to perform a task. And when we ask people, who do you trust? They'll give me an example of close, tight personal relationships.
Hmm.
And I'll say, what would I see that would tell me you trust that person? Well, I tell them things I won't tell other people. But we can also do things like share information or lend people things or make referrals. You know,
Hmm.
you talk to salespeople. It's one thing for me to buy your product. It's another thing for me to refer somebody else to you,
Absolutely.
right? There's a higher level of vulnerability there because I'm putting
Mhm.
not just my cash and time and energy on the line. I'm putting my reputation on the line, my relationships.
Yeah, and it's funny, and you say that about it's a really good point, because the thing that often frustrates a lot of salespeople and people in early in the process is like, well, I'm talking to Darryl, I'm asking him these questions, but he won't give me any real insights. Like, well,
Right.
why should you?
Yeah. Yeah. We have to have a certain level of trust with folks before they'll tell us things. I mean, when I get called from polling agencies and survey
Right.
companies and stuff, I hang up the phone
Yeah.
because they're getting paid to get my information. I'm
Mm.
not,
Yeah. Exactly.
right? And I don't know what they're doing with that information or how they might use it to take advantage of me.
Mm. So if you're a salesperson, you're having those kind of conversations, you have to understand that you have to build some level of trust in order for the other person to feel comfortable with sharing that, even if it's very, very superficial to begin with.
Yeah. And a lot of times when we talk about that willingness to be vulnerable and how we build trust, I often tell people you have to go first.
Hmm.
And so it requires a little bit of vulnerability on our part. And it's a little bit, right? We share, don't scare.
Yeah.
Um, but opening up a little bit to somebody else makes them feel more comfortable opening up to you.
Yeah, and by the way, one thing like I said, because the word has been thrown around a lot, it's not one of those things where more is more. So the more vulnerable you are, and the more you share and overshare and all of that,
Oh
like
God,
it's
no.
yeah, and I think sometimes that's what people have interpreted it as. Oh, I need to be vulnerable, therefore I need to share all these things about myself. Hey, I'm originally from Ireland. One of the hardest things I had to get used to when I came to the States in the first place was how much people share with you.
Right.
So, unsolicited,
Yeah.
and that coming from a culture we're far more reserved about things or whatever, it was quite a culture shock in many ways.
Yeah.
But I think people have misunderstood that vulnerability thing sometimes now, to think that, oh yeah, I just open up about everything and then people see me differently. Well, that's not what people want either.
No, it isn't. And here's the thing is if I make myself a little bit vulnerable to you and it triggers a response in you that says, oh, Daryl's opened up to me a little bit, maybe I can open up to him a little bit.
Hmm.
If I go too big too fast, you start thinking, I can't, I'm really uncomfortable. You've put that weight on me now. And I'm not responding at that level. Right? It's a good way to scare people.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important clarifying point, and I'm glad you clarified that, because, like I said, I mean, vulnerability is getting thrown around so much today that it's worth revisiting what it really means and what it doesn't mean, and that there are levels. There are levels as well,
Yeah,
and you use your vulnerability sparingly and intentionally.
right. And it's an art to figuring out how to be a little bit vulnerable
Hmm.
and accept help from others. Because there's also this strong independent streak in most of us where we don't want to be dependent on someone else.
Yeah,
We're leery of making ourselves vulnerable to them. And
and I
trust
think
levels right now are the lowest we've seen, John.
what's that?
So trust levels are the lowest we've
Oh,
measured.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we live in an era now. Number one, I mean, there's so many things that are converging right now in our so many influences. You've got the social media one where it's all about me, and look at me and
Right.
popularity and all of that. You've got AI now, and people are like, what's real, what's not real. You have people who are constantly like trying to fake things, and all. So we live in a very confused world. And like you said, trust already. I mean, we went through COVID and all of that. That had its legacies as well. So we're at a
Yeah.
point. We're at a point. Yeah, I think where I 100% agree with you. The trust levels are at their lowest ever. Which I guess the good news is you can only really go up from here.
Well, we've fought that instinct for a few years now where it's just been consistently in decline.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the challenge here is you remember I told you it's uncertainty times
Yeah.
vulnerability equals risk. Our vulnerability hasn't gone down. In fact, it may have bumped up a little bit, and our
Mm-hmm.
uncertainty is bouncing all over the place.
Yeah.
So asking people to be just a little more vulnerable is a harder ask than it's been in the past.
Yeah, no, I would say that. I would say then, yeah, the uncertainty part of the equation is obviously weighing very heavily because we live in such uncertain times, and it seems like, whether it's business, geopolitics, whatever, everything is so uncertain right now. I can
Yeah.
see that. I can see that with people, and the other thing too is I think if you take it to like building trust in a sales context, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Number one, we're all slammed with spam calls, with email, with everything, and we perceive ourselves to be just overwhelmed the whole time. So for somebody to reach out to us and actually manage to get us to engage in a conversation with them, like as a prospect, me as a prospect, to engage in a conversation with you as a
Yeah.
salesperson, that's already a pretty heavy lift.
It is. It is. I worked with a mutual fund company, um, and they wanted to figure out how to become dominant in their industry.
Mhm.
And I told them, your best strategy is because you can't create competitive advantage, something that others can't copy with your funds or any of those kinds of things, because people can just copy you. Everything
Sure.
has to be transparent. It's all out in the open. It's about building deep long-term relationships with your customers.
Hmm.
And I spent 18 months with them. And at the end of that time, they did an Ipsos Reid survey, found out that trust was the primary driver of the sales decision,
Mm.
that they were dramatically more trusted than any of their competitors. And they generated 75 cents of every new dollar that came into the industry for the next 2 years.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So at the end of the day, like if you look at that example, right, they weren't selling financial instruments, right? They were selling trust. They were selling the fact that you trusted them to do, to look after your money.
Yeah. And the fact that trust is at such low levels now means that it has incredible value.
Hmm.
Those who are good at building it stand to make out like bandits.
So what are some of the mistakes or missteps that people make that kind of undermine their ability to build trust? I mean, you already said, like, I mean, coming on too strong, pushing too hard, all of that things. Are there other things that maybe things that are even subliminal that we don't really notice about ourselves that may put us in a trust deficit if we're not careful?
So I think that there are 10 levers we can pull to build trust. Those who aren't very good at it have a lever that they pull. It's usually the ability lever. I have these kinds of credentials, this much background, this experience, number one in sales or whatever it might be, right?
So basically, I substitute just my resume for everything.
Yeah, yeah. And I tell people I'm the best at whatever. And I
Hmm.
could come on this podcast and say, oh, I've got a PhD from Duke and I've spoken at Harvard and blah, blah, blah. Most of your listeners don't give a crap,
Hmm.
right? And so I don't even pull the ability lever well unless I include them in the conversation,
Right.
right? And so I actually need to ask them, what would good look like? And that's what I do before every workshop I do.
Hmm.
But that's one of the levers. People who are better at building trust have multiple levers. They show benevolence, which is having someone else's best interest at heart. They show integrity by making commitments that actually line up with the values that they express, or they follow through on their promises. Um, they explain the context well. Like those are different levers that we can pull. People who are really good at building trust understand, have multiple levers, and they know when to pull which one.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting, Darryl, though, if you think about some of the things that you just mentioned there, right? They got the best interest. You feel like they've got your best interests at heart, right?
Yeah.
Uh, uh, follow up and being consistent, and you would think that those would be just things that people instinctively know to do, especially in sales. But you'd be surprised how often those things are not. They're not consistent in in their communication. They're follow. I say, Darryl, this has been great. Look, I'm going to go through all the stuff. I'll validate everything we talked about today. It's fantastic. I'll follow up, by the end of today with an email with next steps, all of that. And then I don't do that until maybe the end of tomorrow, whatever. Which isn't.
Right.
You would say, well, is that a really big deal? You go, well, it kind of is, because if I meant the end of tomorrow, I should have said the end of tomorrow.
Right. And we have a tendency to make promises we can't keep, right? Particularly when things go wrong, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that'll never happen again. Well,
Mhm.
you don't have control over that,
Right.
you know?
It was like when AWS went out the other day and like said the whole world, you can't, if your infrastructure is in AWS, you can't promise that that's never going to happen again. You have no
Right.
control over it.
And, how often do we try to act in someone's best interest and it gets misinterpreted? Again, we can't pull these levers properly in isolation. We can make good guesses.
Mhm.
But a lot of times, if I want to know what success looks like for you, I actually have to ask you. If I want to act in your behalf on your best interests, I need to make it clear that that's what I'm doing so
Yeah.
that there isn't some misinterpretation.
And then you may, as part of that, you may get it. You may get, because you asked that, you may get the invite from the other person to say, I'm not quite sure what good looks like. So, can you help me? Maybe we could together like figure that out, because I may not know. And
Yeah.
but the fact that you asked me allows me then to, as you said, reciprocate and go, actually, I'm not quite sure. Let's talk about that.
Well, and one of the approaches that I got the sales folks at the mutual fund to take was when they were dealing with financial advisors
Mm-hmm.
who were their clients. I said, you should be able to help them understand how to sell to their clients. And you should be able to help them understand that some of their products are leading class, like first in class, and some of them aren't.
Right.
And be able to give an honest take of somebody else's product might be better for you in this instance.
Yeah. And isn't that the greatest though? That is almost the greatest trust building thing you can do, is if your product or service, if you realize that it's not the fit for the person you're working with, but something that is, it could
Yeah.
be, could be a competitor of yours or whatever, but you offer that because it's the best thing for the customer, even though it's hard for you to say, okay, I'm gonna have to walk away from this. It's not a good fit for us, and not maybe one of our competitors takes it, but that's okay because it's the right thing to do.
And it's thinking long term instead of short term.
Yeah.
And it gets you referrals if they know someone else who does need your product.
Yeah, no,
Or
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And sometimes we expect too much. I mean, that you mentioned referrals earlier, this happens. I guarantee it's happening in companies right now. It's getting towards the end of the year. People aren't making their numbers or whatever. There's probably the sales leaders probably sent out a memo: go find referrals. Ask all our existing customers for referrals. And what do? Out of the blue, you get an email or whatever from your salesperson saying, "Hey, Darryl, you know anybody else who needs our service or whatever?" And maybe that's, you haven't heard from them since the time they sold to you or whatever. And
right.
you're expected to go do work on behalf of the vendor.
Yeah, and put my reputation at risk doing so.
Exactly. To somebody
Right.
who maybe you don't even have a good relationship with. You're supposed to refer them to somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a different thing if you come to me and you say, how's the product working for you?
Right.
Has it met your needs?
Mm-hmm.
And are there ways that we could improve our service to you? What are some gaps? What are some holes? What's some feedback?
Yeah.
And do you know of other people who would benefit from this? Because
Exactly.
we're trying to have positive impact in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different take, right?
No, it is a completely different take because, like I said, I mean, you go into any sales organization and say, like, what's your referral strategy or process or whatever, and a lot of them would say, oh yeah, we do blasts every so often, and you go, that's not
Right.
a referral strategy.
Yeah, the best way to get referrals is to have really happy customers.
Exactly. So that should be your referral strategy, should be customer delight.
And part of the challenge we see within a lot of organizations is that the sales and marketing departments aren't well honed with the rest of the organization. So their incentive structures are misaligned, and they're being told to get out there and flog product and say whatever you have to, make whatever promises and commitments you need to get volume out the door, knowing full well that the organization can't follow through on those promises.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I think misalignment in organizations is a huge one, because let's face it, if you want to trust a brand, right, or a company or whatever, you have to have a consistent experience across
Right.
whatever touch points, from the minute you interact with the brand to sales, marketing, customer service, whatever it is, implementation, supply, whatever that is. If you have different experiences with different points of your buyer journey, inconsistency is not a good thing, because you'll always default, because it's humans, we'll always default to the worst of those experiences, not to the best
Right.
one.
Right. I worked with a telecom who, I was talking about exactly that. Every time a customer touches you, they should have the same message, the
Hmm.
same response. You should be aware of what's going on for them. And they said, yeah, we just outsourced all that because we were going to save a few bucks. I said,
Okay.
that's why I don't run into the same guy at the same kiosk twice in the same day. Right. If I come back 6 hours later, that guy doesn't work there anymore.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So,
Uh, exactly.
yeah,
It's not good for building long-term relationships.
it
Um,
isn't.
yeah. So Darryl, last question. What is one piece of advice you would just give to everybody? Like, so, because as you said, like, trust is at an all-time low. What's one piece of advice that you'd give to everybody that may help them even like raise it a percentage point?
So there's two things I'm going to share. One is that I always start with a small bit of vulnerability, which can include just sharing your name, or you know why you're asking the question, or
Hmm.
your lack of knowledge about something, and then a dose of benevolence. Right,
Right.
trying to be helpful to someone. And one of the ways I get people to pull that lever is with the following conversation. I'll say to them, here's what you want to say. I heard this guy, Darryl, he was talking about trust. He said that benevolence is important. Really, it just means having someone's back.
Yeah.
And I think I do that, but it doesn't always seem to land that way. Have you ever experienced that? And overwhelmingly, people will say, yeah, I've experienced that. And then
Hmm.
get curious about that. What did they try? How did it backfire? What went wrong? Then narrow the funnel and say, has someone ever really had your back? What did they do? What did it look like? How did it
Mm,
feel? Get curious about that, because now you're getting hints.
yeah.
You're priming them to think about what benevolence means for them.
Mm,
Then narrow the funnel down to its bottom and say, what is success for you? How do I help you get there? What would it look like if I was acting in your best interest?
yeah.
Now you've created the opportunity for transparency, so
Yeah.
that later when you do something, you could say, you remember when you told me this is what benevolence looked like for you? This is me trying to do that.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Darryl, that's fantastic. I mean, those are such practical things for people to do. Easy, they sound easy, or simple rather. But I always say simple doesn't equate to easy, because there's plenty of simple things that people don't do, because it
Right.
takes a little bit of work, and it takes a bit of consistency, and it takes a bit of intentionality and all of that. And so thank you for sharing those simple tips. Now it's time for people to do the hard work of implementing them. All of Darryl's information will be below this video, but before we go, please do remind people about what you do.
So Trust Unlimited, we're a consulting and teaching organization. We teach people how to build stronger relationships. And right now we're focusing in on young men, trying to help aspiring young men thrive by
Excellent.
building deeper relationships. So
Absolutely. That's fantastic. And then people need help these days, unfortunately, building deeper relationships, because we live in such a superficial, crazy world. So
our
thanks again.
relationships, our
Yeah,
relationships are a mile wide and an inch deep, John. We've lost some of that ability.
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, listen, thanks, Darryl. This has been fantastic. And thank you for watching and listening. And I will see you all again very soon. Thank you.